Hello again, everybody. Welcome to Business Economics. Professor Kern here. Going to walk you through a little bit of what's in the week one lesson, which should give you some interesting insights and information to handle the discussion questions for this week, as well as to do some of the homework problems. Keeping in mind, the homework problems are not a graded part of the course. However, doing those and understanding those will come in really, really handy on the quiz, the midterm, and the final. So please feel free to work on those this week, and then when we meet together in week 2, I will be happy to go over some of those problems with you, okay? So welcome to the first week of class. Again, I'm sorry I can't be there in person with you, but hopefully you'll find this video as a nice augment to what's in the textbook and what's already in the course shell. And this week is kind of a basic intro to the overarching concept of economics and how that all plays into a business setting. And so in order to understand that, basically we're going to begin with an understanding of the concepts of supply and demand. And once again, for those of you that have a business background or an economics background, I apologize. This is kind of bare bones stuff right at the beginning, and that's okay. If it's easy stuff, it's easy stuff. If not, it's a good refresher, okay? And I'll start with demand, because I like doing that one first. So, what is demand for a product? In order to have demand for a product, you really need to have two important ingredients, okay? Like, how many of you out there have a demand for a Ferrari, okay? I don't have demand for a Ferrari for this reason. You need two components to demand. You must have both the willingness and the ability to purchase. I have the willingness. I'd love a Ferrari. I'd be totally psyched if I had one. What I lack tremendously is the ability, i.e. in this case the cash, to purchase said Ferrari. So in order to have demand, you've got to have both. So let's take a look at demand then for something that I can have demand for, that I have both the willingness and ability to buy. And let's say we're looking at the demand for beer, okay? And let's say my beer of choice is, I don't know, Sam Adams. And to be honest, I'm not a drinker, so I'm just kind of making these up. And let's take a look at the quantity of beer that I demand at various prices. And this will give us what's called a schedule of demand, okay? Because I don't always demand the same amount of stuff depending on the price, and neither do most people for most products, okay? So let's say, for example, at $25 a case, and we're going to look at the demand, the quantity of beer I demand, let's say, in a year, okay? So how much beer do I buy in a year at $25 a case? Let's assume that it's 15 cases, okay? And then let's see what happens to the quantity of beer that I demand as the price begins to change, all right? So let's say I go to my local beer distributor, because here in Pennsylvania that's how they sell beer, in state-sponsored private beer distributors, not in supermarkets yet. However, I hear that's changing. But anyway, either way, let's say I go to purchase a case of beer, and much to my dismay, it's now $45 a case. Whoa! Now you know intuitively, if I normally buy 15 cases a year at $25, what will happen to the amount of cases, the quantity, that I demand at this new price, right? And you know that I'm going to buy less, right? So let's say I only buy 6 cases. And then I go to my beer distributor the following week, and oh, goodness gracious, for Sam Adams, it's $60 a case. Wow, that's disappointing. So maybe special occasions, I buy 2 cases. Or perhaps I get lucky and I go to the beer distributor and oh my gosh, Sam Adams is $5 a case. Well, I may not be seeing you guys for quite a long time now, because let's assume I buy 30 cases at that price. Either way, this represents my personal demand schedule for beer. Okay, it's an individual demand schedule. Now, primarily in economics, we deal with aggregate demand schedules, but to get the concept down, we'll just deal with individual ones for now. Now, my demand for products can be graphed, and economists love to graph things, right? And whenever we graph things, it's always price on the vertical axis and quantity on the horizontal axis. And if I graph this, this line would look something like this. It would slope downward. For most products, demand curves slope downward, which illustrates something called the law of demand. And the law of demand is simply this. In a lot of economics, until you get into the nuts and bolts of calculating stuff, but a lot of it is pretty common sense. Excuse me, I have a drink of coffee. The law of demand says basically that at higher prices, the quantity demanded will be less, and at lower prices, the quantity demanded will be greater. And that was illustrated in my personal demand for Sam Adams, right? At $5 a case, I wanted to go out and buy a lot of it, and at $60 a case, I didn't buy nearly as much. Okay? So that's the demand schedule. All right? And this is a graph of the demand for this product. Now, if I were a business owner, would I be interested in knowing ways or what factors would either increase or decrease demand? Right? And again, intuitively, you know that, yeah, if I owned a business, I'd be absolutely interested in that. And as a personal example, for a number of years, I used to own a bunch of ice cream stores, right? I owned 3 what were called Tasty Freezes, kind of like a Dairy Queen, depending on where you live. But I owned 3 ice cream stores, all relatively in the same geographic area, okay? So as a business owner, I'm certainly concerned about the supply of ice cream. We'll talk about that in a little bit later. But I'm real concerned about demand, too. So what impacts demand for a product? And for demand to change, okay, the entire curve must shift. For example, an increase in demand means if this is my original demand line, D1, for demand to change, the entire curve shifted outward to the right. If the entire curve shifts to the right, demand has increased. If the entire curve, however, let's say shifts the other way, if it shifts inward or to the left, that means that demand as a whole has decreased. Okay? So knowing that, the first thing we want to figure out is what doesn't impact demand. And most students, when I ask them what does impact demand, the very first thing that they will shout out is price, price, price. Okay? But does price impact demand? The answer is no. Although that seems almost counterintuitive. But the way we understand the concept of demand, the entire line has to shift, right? So if this is the demand for ice cream cones, using my ice cream store example, at $1, I sold this amount of cones. If I raised it to $2, I sell this amount of cones. If I drop it to 20 cents, which I would not, I would sell that amount of cones. Did the line move? No. The line did not move at all. The original demand line simply shows me at different prices how many ice cream cones will be demanded. So what price equals, friends? Price will tell you quantity demanded. There is a difference between demand. Demand simply says the willingness and ability. Okay? That is different than quantity. Price shows you the quantity demanded. The price, in and of itself, does not shift the entire demand line one way or the other. Okay? So at my ice cream store, price, in and of itself, is not going to impact demand. Okay? But what will? There are 5 things that will cause a demand curve to shift one way or the other. Okay? We will refer to those as the determinants of demand. So once again, what we want to figure out is how can I get the whole demand line to move, the whole demand curve to shift, right? So let's stick with my ice cream stores, okay? Here's the original demand, again, price here, quantity here, and let's assume for a moment this is the demand for ice cream cones in McKees Rocks, which is a little town outside of Pittsburgh, which is where my biggest store was. So let's assume we're trying to calculate and figure out what would increase or decrease demand for ice cream cones in McKees Rocks, because as the owner of the Tastee-Freez in McKees Rocks, that matters to me. Okay? Because generally speaking, increased demand is going to translate into what for me? That's right, more money. And that's really what we want to figure out. So here are the things that will determine demand. The first is, put them over here, number of consumers. And again, a lot of this is intuitive, right? If the population of McKees Rocks, the town where my store is, doubles, am I a happy Tastee-Freez owner? Well, the answer is obviously yes. Why am I a happy Tastee-Freez owner? Because some of those people moving into McKees Rocks, guess what they do? Right, they eat ice cream. So if the population, if the number of consumers en masse increases, demand would have shifted outward, like this. Annoyingly, however, in the 10 years that I owned that place, the population of McKees Rocks went down virtually every year. So a lot of the people that were leaving McKees Rocks, going somewhere else, dying, whatever it was they were doing, but they weren't there anymore, a lot of those people that were leaving, who were they? Well, some of them were my customers. So number of consumers will increase or decrease, will impact certainly demand. That's one of them. Okay? What else will impact demand? Probably the single largest determinant of demand is this one. It is consumer taste. And I don't mean actual taste, it simply means how popular is something, right? So if something is more popular, demand goes up. Like here in the Pittsburgh area, if you look at demand for tickets to Pittsburgh Pirates baseball games, okay, over the last few years, the Pirates stink. They're lousy, they're terrible, they're not popular. So generally speaking, demand, the worse they get, the less popular they get, the more demand goes down. On the other hand, if you have a successful team, like the Penguins, our hockey team in this area, because they tend to get better and better and better, they become more popular, demand for those things goes up. I recall a personal example many years ago. I don't know if any of you remember this. If you know what a Furby was. Furby was this stupid little doll, like looked like a gremlin kind of thing, right? And for whatever reason, consumer taste. And by the way, there doesn't have to be a reason. It was popular. Okay? And my niece Casey wanted one for Christmas. And Uncle Mike doesn't disappoint his niece. So I went out shopping to get Casey a Furby. Being a guy, as most guys in the class will know, when do you do most of your Christmas shopping? Right, Christmas Eve. So I head out Christmas Eve with every intention of getting my niece a Furby. So I go to Toys R Us, big toy store, and they laugh at me. Like, oh my gosh, we haven't had Furbies in for months. Ah, a little irritated. So off I go to Walmart. Certainly Walmart could help me out. And I go to Walmart, same deal, nothing there. And it's almost like 6 o'clock now, so everything's getting ready to close. I'm getting really panicky. So I get to this toy store, KB Toys it was called, a little kind of small toy store chain. And I ask him, I'm like, look, you gotta have one in the back somewhere, right? And he's like, oh, we did. And we just sold it to this lady. And I can see this nice old lady walking out of the store. And I'm like, okay. I swear I would never do something like this. But I walk up to the lady, and I'm like, hi, ma'am. You know, first of all, Merry Christmas kind of stuff, right? And I said, I know you just bought the last Furby at KB Toys. And I was wondering if you'd be willing to sell it to me. I have a niece. You know, give the whole sob story about my poor niece, blah, blah, blah. Now, the Furby, I think, retailed for like $20, and it was overpriced at that. However, demand, because of the popularity of the Furby, oh, yeah, I paid more than $20 for that thing. I don't want to tell you how much more I paid because I'm a tad embarrassed by it, but I did pay more. Why was the price of a Furby so much greater? Because demand was so much greater. And why was demand greater? Demand was greater because of the popularity of the item. Okay? Like if I went home tomorrow and there was a story on the news that says eating soft serve ice cream will increase your life by 10 years. Okay? Am I a Happy Tasty Free Zoner? Heck yeah, I'm a Happy Tasty Free Zoner. Why am I a Happy Tasty Free Zoner? Because all of a sudden, soft serve ice cream, which I sell, is going to be super popular. So demand for my product will go up. Okay? That's consumer taste. Another thing that will impact demand is something called consumer income. And that works in two ways. There are two types of goods we talk about in economics. There are normal and there are inferior goods. There's no set definition. Usually it's a matter of personal preference as to what's a normal and what's an inferior good. Like to me, ramen noodle soup is an inferior good. You know why it's an inferior good to me? Because when I was a poor college student many, many years ago, I ate bucket loads of that stuff. I ate it for breakfast, I ate it for lunch, and I ate it for dinner. Why did I eat so much ramen noodle soup when I was a college student? Because I was poor, because I had no income, right? So as my income rose, guess what happened to my demand for ramen noodle soup? I won't even keep that stuff in the house anymore. So demand for inferior goods works inversely with income. As your income goes up, your demand for inferior products goes down. Most goods are normal. Ice cream sundaes, that's a normal product. If your income went up, you might go out and eat sundaes more often in the summertime, right? So that's another thing that can have an impact on demand, consumer income, which was another annoying factor in my McKees Rock scenario because according to the census, over the last few years, once again, income in this demographic area continued to go down. So as people had less income, some of them bought less ice cream, which was disturbing. Although I said price does not impact demand, and it doesn't, the price of related goods does. And what is a related good? There are two types of related goods. There are substitutes and there are complements. I'll do complementary goods first. Complementary goods are goods that are consumed together, like hot dogs and hot dog buns, milk and cereal. Okay? If the price of hot dogs goes way down, let's say you get a buy one, get one free, which in essence cuts the price by 50%. If the price of hot dogs drops dramatically, do you think that has any impact at all on the demand for hot dog buns? And obviously you know the answer to that. Certainly it does. The same thing is true for milk and cereal, football tickets and beer maybe, I don't know. Anything you consume together are complementary goods. Substitutes are kind of the opposite, just as the word implies. They substitute. Orange juice and apple juice. If I normally buy 2 cases or 2 cans of orange juice and 1 can of apple juice, will a decrease in the price of apple juice impact my demand for orange juice? And the answer is yes. So if I go to the grocery store and apple juice is buy one, get 5 free or some ridiculous thing like that, in effect dramatically dropping the price of apple juice, does that impact my demand for orange juice? And you know it does, and you know exactly what happens to my demand for orange juice. At least in the short run, it'll go down because there's so much apple juice now, right? So the price of related goods will impact demand. And finally, the last thing that impacts demand is consumer expectations. As a consumer, if you thought, for example, let's say the government's about to pass a law raising the price of the tax on cigarettes by another like $5. Okay? So your expectation is next month the price of cigarettes will be very, very high. What happens to your demand for cigarettes today? Right. Obviously, again, a lot of this is common sense and intuitive. You know that you're going to run out and buy as many cigarettes as you can today. So your immediate demand for cigarettes went way up. So all 5 of these factors, and these are the only 5 factors, that will move a demand line completely. Okay? So that's half the equation, right? That's the demand side. Let's take a quick look then, if we can, at the supply side. Okay? So if demand was the willingness and ability to buy, what is supply? Simply put, it's the willingness and ability to produce. Okay? So you have to have both to be a producer. For example, I had the willingness to produce ice cream cones in McKees Rocks, okay, because I wanted to. That's the easy part. I also had the ability. I owned the Tastee-Freez there. So I am a producer, a supplier of ice cream cones in McKees Rocks. And once again, just as we had demand schedules, we also have a supply schedule. So let's take a look, price and quantity, and let's see how things work on the supply side of the equation, shall we? Let's say at $1 a cone, we'll look at ice cream cones in McKees Rocks. At $1, let's say I sell 1,000 cones a month. Oh, a month? No way, let's make that a week. I'd go broke if it's 1,000 a month. Let's say I sell 1,000 cones in a week. Let's see what kind of a smart business person you would be, economically speaking. If for some reason the price of an ice cream cone went from $1 to $2, that means, would you be a happy Tastee-Freez owner? And the answer is absolutely. I mean, consumers were willing to pay $1 for this cone last week. Now they're willing to pay $2. I'm a happy owner. What would you do with that, though? Would you change the amount of ice cream that you were willing to produce? For example, if you could now get $2 a cone, would you stay open later? Would you hire more people? Would you open a second store? I sure as heck would. So that would certainly increase the amount of cones. And why did it go up? I don't know. It could be anything. Consumer taste, consumer income. There are things that impact demand. And when demand goes up, price goes up, at least in the short run. So on the other hand, let's say for whatever reason, nobody wanted ice cream anymore. Oh my gosh. Let's say I go home, and instead of that other news story we talked about before, the news story says eating soft serve ice cream will give you cancer. Oh, crap. I'm not real happy about that as a Tastee-Freez owner. So all of a sudden, nobody's willing to pay more than 25 cents a cone. Not good news for the Tastee-Freez. So what happens to the amount of workers I have if I'm only making 25 cents or selling a cone for 25 cents? Well, you know some of them are not going to be with me much longer. So with fewer employees, I probably will not make as many cones. Okay? So much as we had a law of demand, we also, this is a supply schedule here, which shows us the law of supply. Okay? And the law of supply basically, much like the reverse of the law of demand, says this: at higher prices, producers are willing to produce more. That makes sense, right? At $2 a cone, I'd be producing ice cream cones morning, noon, and night at that store. At lower prices, at 25 cents, I'm just not going to produce that many cones. I'll make something else, Italian ices, or sell food, or do something that I can make money on, right? So that's how supply looks. When we look at supply graphically, again, it's always price and quantity. Supply goes this way. Demand sloped this way downward, supply slopes upward because of the law of supply. At high prices over here, I was willing to make an awful lot of cones. At low prices here, I was not willing to produce nearly as many cones. Okay? So that's what supply looks like. And much like with demand, what does not impact supply? Price. Price impacts quantity supplied only. Okay? Price impacts quantity demanded. Price impacts quantity supplied. But not demand and not supply itself. We just learned there were 5 things that shifted demand. There are also 5 things that will shift supply. And when supply moves as a whole, okay, the entire line, much like what demand moves as well. When supply goes up, The entire line, the entire supply curve shifts to the right. When supply goes down, the entire supply line shifts to the left, shifts inward. Okay? So what are the things that will determine total supply then? And again, we have 5 determinants of demand. We also have determinants of supply. And what are they? Well, the first one's really easy. The first determinant of supply is the number of producers, right? In my little geographic area, McKees Rocks, let's say there was the Tastee-Freez, and there was this other shop called Remember When. Ugh. So if there's 2 suppliers of cones in McKees Rocks, I make 1,000 cones, Remember When makes 1,000 cones. The weekly supply of ice cream cones in McKees Rocks is 2,000 cones. That's pretty easy. If the Dairy Queen opens in McKees Rocks, assuming they sell at least 1 cone, which I'm sure they would, or produce at least one cone, what happens to the supply of ice cream cones? Well, it would obviously go up, right? Just like the reverse of that, if Remember When were shut down by the Board of Health because they're a dirty, rotten ice cream place, which they were, if they go out of business, at least short term, what happens to the supply of ice cream cones in McKees Rocks? Obviously it goes down, okay? So number of producers is a determinant of supply. Another one is technology. As far as I can think, and I can't think of an opposite example, I think technology only drives supply really in one direction. If it's a related technology, and it usually increases supply, right? I used to have these, when I first bought the Tastee-Freez, we had these old soft serve machines, and out of a bag of ice cream mix, you could squeeze maybe about 300 cones out of it, because they were old, they were inefficient machines. Then I bought some new machines, and that same bag of mix, instead of getting 300 cones, I got 450 cones. Simply because the technology was better, that it allowed me to maximize the resources more, okay? Although technology sometimes might drive supply down, like the development of the computer, it impacted demand first for typewriters, which then in turn impacted the supply for typewriters. But generally speaking, technology has really done a good job of moving supply outward, increasing supply. Third is input prices, or just inputs. Your book may call them resource prices, I don't remember, but basically the resources you use to make your product. A good example of that, in my ice cream store, I would buy my ice cream from like Taylor Dairy, right? And let's say I buy 3 bags a week, and each bag I could make 300 cones out of. So, if I buy 3 bags, and I get 300 cones out of each bag, the total supply of ice cream cones in McKees Rocks is 900 cones. And each bag, let's say, costs 50 bucks. What would happen if the price of my inputs went up? What if Taylor Dairy jacked the price up from $50 to $95 a bag? If the price of your resources goes up, you as the business owner have to do what, generally speaking? If the price goes up, like we all have personal demand schedules and personal laws of demand, right? So on my end as a business owner, if they jack up the price of my resources, I will probably consume less of it. So maybe instead of buying 3 bags a week now, I decide I can only afford 2 bags of ice cream mix. So a rise in the price of resources. Did this have an impact on the supply of ice cream cones in McKees Rocks? And of course you know the answer is absolutely it did. Before the price increase, there were 900 ice cream cones produced. Now, the maximum number of cones is 600. So in this case, and again, the reverse would be true as well. If they dropped the price from 50 bucks a bag to 20 bucks a bag, I would buy more bags, and that would have a positive increase, or a positive impact on the supply of ice cream cones in McKees Rocks. Okay? So input prices. The fourth thing, we had this one before, is the price of related goods. That impacted demand. It also impacts supply. For example, there was a Rita's Italian Ices in another part of the town where I live. Okay, not really a direct competitor per se, but they sold a similar product. So let's say there's a story on the news. Eating soft serve ice cream will, be the greatest thing in the world before you live to be 1,000 years old. So either way, demand for soft serve ice cream has gone off the charts. Okay? So I'm a Happy Tasty Freeze owner. I'm making a lot of money because the price of an ice cream cone went from $1 to, let's say, $3. Oh my gosh, I'd be rich as heck. Loving that. And what happens to the guy that owns the Italian Ices? Well, for him, he's got a store, right? He's got freezers. He's probably doing okay selling Italian Ices, right? But in this case for him, what should he do? He's got freezers and he's got a storefront. He'll probably still sell some Italian Ices, but if you own that Rita's Italian Ice, you'd also start producing what? If you were smart, you'd start making some ice cream too. So the price of a related good in this case, the price of an ice cream cone, did it impact the supply of Italian Ices? And the answer is yes. Because the Rita's Italian Ice owner, seeing all the money to be made selling ice cream now, devotes some of his resources to making ice cream, doesn't he? If he's a smart business owner, he will. And if he does that, he'll have less resources and less money to make what? And less store and freezer shelf space. Italian Ices. So the price of a related good will impact supply. And finally, the last one is producer expectations. If you own the Tastee-Freez and your expectation was that for the next 2 weeks it is going to be about 75 degrees, sunny, no rain, would that impact the amount of cones you would start producing? If you wish to stay in business, the answer is yes. If my expectation was this is going to be the future conditions, I'd start producing a ton of cones. If on the other hand, my expectation is it's going to be cold and wet and rainy, people don't like to stand in line and get wet while they order their ice cream, I would produce less cones, right? So expectations also have an impact on the overall supply. So we had 5 things that impacted demand. We now have 5 things that impact supply. What's most important for our discussion is what happens when we put the two together, okay? And when we finally get around to the magical moment, putting demand shifting this way generally, supply shifting this way, we're interested in where they intersect at this point here, which we refer to as equilibrium. Okay? Equilibrium is the point of maximum efficiency in a market because everything that was produced is consumed. There's no waste. And whatever the price is at that level, that is equilibrium market price. And according to some economic theorists, Adam Smith, the father of free market capitalist economics, if you leave markets alone, they kind of gravitate towards that. Because markets in and of themselves strive for efficiency. There's a couple of cases in which, however, this may or may not work especially well. Let's take a look at a few of them. First, let's begin with a concept we're going to really get into a little bit later in the chapter, and which you're going to actually get into calculating. And that is a concept referred to as elasticity of demand. Most demand lines, again, price and quantity, shift downward. When they shift downward like this, they have what is called elastic demand. Basically what that means is this. Elasticity refers to how responsive is the quantity demanded to a change in price. And when the line shifts like this, you'll notice it does respond. You change the price, and the number that you demand, the quantity, does change. It is responsive. But sometimes demand lines don't shift quite that much. Sometimes they may look like this, and in very rare cases, straight up and down. If it's straight up and down, it is perfectly inelastic. That means it did not respond to a change in price. Okay? Certain goods and products tend to be more or less elastic or inelastic, depending really on a number of important factors. The most important factor is this. It is the availability of substitutes. Gasoline has a relatively short-term inelastic demand. Why? If you leave class tonight and you get in your car and your gas tank is on E, and I don't mean just E, I mean deep in the E, okay? And you pull into your gas station and gas is $9 a gallon. Are you irritated? Absolutely. I would be interested in what choices you have. You will pay the $9 grudgingly, yes, but at least in the short run, there's no substitute for gas in the car. If you need to get from A to B, and you need to use the car, the only thing that will allow you to do that is having gasoline in the car, right? So demand can be inelastic based on the availability of substitutes. It can also be inelastic on a number of other factors, one of which is the percentage of income that the purchase requires. If a pack of gum goes from like 50 cents to 75 cents, which is, percentage-wise a huge increase, do you care? Probably not. If I like a particular brand of gum, it's a little higher, I don't care. On the other hand, if let's say the gum actually doubled from 50 cents to $1, not a big deal. What if I'm buying a $150,000 home that just doubled in price as well? Well, that's an entirely different issue. So sometimes if the good requires a high percentage of income, that also impacts elasticity. Okay? So we're going to talk a little bit more about that in my next video segment when I'm going to show you how to calculate elasticity. But just understand that not all demand lines neatly slope down at some nice equal rate. They don't. We use that example because it's nice and simple and it's easy to understand the concept, but by and large, products will have different elasticities at different prices. Okay? Now, the other issue we're going to talk about, and we're talking about markets and efficiency, because one of the discussion questions we're going to work on this week asks you a little bit about the minimum wage. Okay? And I'm not saying whether the minimum wage should go up or down. I just saw in the State of the Union address the president wants to raise it to $9 an hour. Okay? Let's take a look at what happens anytime, now again, at equilibrium right here. Okay? That's market equilibrium. That says if you leave the market alone, supply pushes this way, demand pushes this way, and bang, we wind up at a price that the market clears at. Okay, whatever that may be. There's a couple times, and again, this is assuming these lines are not drawn to scale. I don't know the elasticity of unskilled labor. I don't know the elasticity of supply for unskilled labor. Okay? I'm pretty sure they're not perfectly inelastic though, so they probably to some degree slope. So what happens anytime you mess with market equilibriums? When you do that, you are in effect creating what are called price controls. And there's two types. There is a price floor and a price ceiling. And the minimum wage is, for all intents and purposes, it's a price floor. And a price floor, by definition, means any time you arbitrarily set a price above equilibrium. Okay? So let's say the market, if you left it alone, the market for unskilled labor was $6 an hour, and in my little town there was 1,000 jobs. Okay? That had that. So the market is clear. There's 1,000 jobs at $6 an hour, and there's 1,000 people that are willing and able to take a job at $6 an hour. So there's nothing wasted. Then the government steps in and says, oh, wait a minute. You can't have a can't live on $6 an hour, that's terrible. So we're going to tell everybody that we're going to raise the minimum wage. And again, I am not saying whether it's good or bad, but I can tell you what will happen. You have to decide for yourself which is fine, okay? If you raise the minimum wage to $9 an hour, that's above 6, right? So all you have to do to figure out what happens, simply put, is draw the line across. When you raised the minimum wage to $9 an hour, did the demand for labor change? No. Did the supply of labor change? No. Because price does not impact demand or supply. What it did impact was the quantity, though. And here's what will happen when you raise the minimum wage above what the market says they're willing to pay. First off, see, right here, it used to bang into the supply and demand lines at the same place. So the market cleared, right? There were 1,000 jobs at that price, or at that rate, and 1,000 people that wanted those jobs, and so it all worked out. Nobody was unhappy. But look at where it hits the demand line now. What has happened to the demand, the quantity demanded of unskilled labor? Well, it's gone down. By how much, I don't know. The only way we would know that was by calculating the elasticity of both and figuring out just exactly how much slope there is in this line. But to some degree, there will be less jobs. And I know that intuitively, too. At my Tastee-Freez, which is relatively unskilled labor, and I don't mean to belittle the many wonderful people that work for us at that store, but the requisite skill set for working at the Tastee-Freez is to pull the lever, release the lever, and hand the cone out the window. I mean, it's not rocket science. So if you tell me I got to pay $9 an hour, chances are pretty good, because most small businesses, at least mine, operate on a very small profit margin. Okay? So if I got to pay $9 an hour, chances are I'll be working at the store, chances are my kids will be working at the store, and chances are people I have to pay won't be working at the store. So the amount of jobs, let's say, goes from 1,000 to 500. So that's half the story. The other half of the story is this. It also bangs into the supply line in a different place, the quantity supply. And you know this to be true too. Do you think there are people at home right now, especially let's say kids, that aren't working, because $6 an hour, who would do that? But at $9 an hour, are more people going to be looking for these jobs? Absolutely. So the quantity of labor supply shoots way out here to 1,500. The problem is there's a gap now. There's a gap now between quantity demanded and quantity supply. At the market price, there was not. But when you arbitrarily put something above that, you have created, in essence, a surplus. Simply put, there's too many workers. Too much labor, not enough jobs. So when you increase the minimum wage, a couple things will happen. These people down here, very happy. They got a pay raise. Good for them. These people here, less happy. You know why? Because I laid them off, and my fellow business owners laid them off, or fired them, or whatever you want to call it, but their jobs are gone. And these people over here, who used to be happy, because they were happy at home, they didn't want a job, now they want one. What's the problem? No job. So, depending on, and again, I'm sure President Obama has better economists than I do at my disposal. And he probably has a greater idea about the relative elasticity of these lines. But I am relatively certain, economically speaking, that any time you create a price floor, minimum wage by definition is a price floor. When you do that, what invariably will happen will be there's a surplus of labor. There will be less jobs at that price, and there will be more people looking for them than there were before. Okay? That is a price floor. On the other hand, sometimes you get, and maybe to some of you that sounds like a bad idea, but what about this? Here's a great idea. How about a price ceiling? A price ceiling is any time you set a price below the market. Let's try that, shall we? Let's see what happens. Instead of the market for labor, let's look at the market for gasoline. Here's a great idea. Let's see if you like this. Price, quantity, demand, supply. And by the way, even though moments ago I said the demand for gasoline was inelastic, It's inelastic in the short run, not necessarily in the long run. Like, if the price of gas is $9 a gallon tomorrow, I'm not going to run out and buy an electric car. If, however, the price of gas keeps getting higher and higher and higher, more and more and more people will consider those alternatives. So in the long run, it tends to be inelastic, or at least more so. But anyway, let's just, for the sake of arguments, say that the market price is $3.50 a gallon, and in my town they sell 1,000 gallons, because we'll do an easy example. And then government says, whoa, I got a great idea. Gas is way too high, oil companies make way too much money, heck with the free market, we're stepping in here and we're going to help everybody out. And we're going to say, you can't charge more than $1 a gallon. Now that's a great idea, right? Or is it? At $3.50, there were 1,000 gallons of gas available at that price, and the total amount of gas demanded by people at that price was 1,000. Nothing got wasted. Okay? Anytime you put a price below market equilibrium, again, I'm not saying whether it's good or bad, but I will tell you what will happen. The quantity supplied will now go down. Seriously, if you owned an oil company, I mean, oil will last for how long? Like forever. So if you tell me I can only get $1 for this, I'll just hold on to it for a while, right? Wouldn't you? So the supply of gas will go down, right? So let's say in my town there's only 500 gallons available. Yet, you think more people do more driving if gas is only $1 a gallon? You know they will, right? So what happens to the quantity of gas that is demanded? It goes way up. Again, the problem is the gap. You have created a gap here, not a surplus. We have a shortage, right? And what happens when you get a shortage? Usually, see, people are willing to pay $3.50 for gas at the market price. But when you arbitrarily changed it and said, oh, no, we're going to make it a different price, what happens is black markets tend to develop here. So people will buy the gas at $1 or whatever, and I'd hold on to it. And then when you run out of gas, oh, heck yeah, I'll sell it to you. Let's make it $5 a gallon. So either way, the main point with price controls, and again, I'm not saying they're bad. I mean, in my mind, they probably are. But a number of great economists disagree with me. But either way, one of the things when you deal with the discussion question this week is to think to yourself, in essence, what's the impact of it? And you can decide for yourself whether or not you think it's a good idea, bad idea. That's entirely up to you. But in essence, that's supply, that's demand, that's elasticity. The next video I have for you shows you how to calculate elasticity and what, from a business standpoint, you do with that information with regards to issues like revenue and whether you should raise or lower prices. Okay? Thank you for listening to the lecture, and I will look forward to seeing you in class next week. Have a great day. Bye-bye.